I think what's also interesting is, I forgot. What are they thinking? Yeah. I think what's also interesting is that, Yeah, thanks. That's the hook. The pre-cap will have that.
How we are looking into intimacy. We are no longer going into maybe the temples or the churches or other institutions to look for love. We are on our smartphones, going to dating apps and looking for love. When we talk about university, campus, college students, the social norm is that as young adults, you have to explore. So young adults get into that pressure to maybe experiment and explore during this time because they think that's the norm to do it.
You're welcome.
Hi. Hello.
No?
Hello and welcome to another edition of the JIBS podcast. Today we have a really contemporary topic called modern love. We are joined by Tani Chaudhary, who's a lecturer at the Jindal Institute of Behavioral Sciences. Hi Tani.
Hi.
Happy to have you here.
Same here.
Tani teaches a course on modern love. So I think she's best placed to sort of explain to us this new phenomena of love, which is called modern love, and how that's different from traditional love, or is there even a difference? So Tani, can you tell us what is modern love and how is it conceptualized?
Absolutely. So modern love, when we talk about modern relationships, the first thing that comes to our mind is this must be something that young adults are feeling in today's time. So if I have to define it in one single statement, it is the concept that we are losing away the traditional notions around relationships, and the whole structure of intimacy has transformed in modern times. So we just delve into those
Okay, and how
contents.
has that transformed?
So if you look into traditional, historically speaking, it was mostly based on certain norms that were attached to the genders. But in modern relationships, for example, men were the providers, women were the homemakers, running the house, doing the emotional labor. But now if you look into...
And mostly straight.
Yes, mostly heteronormative. But now if you look into the concepts of modern relationships, young adults are at the forefront of exploring their sexuality, exploring their identity, gender-wise, sexuality-wise. So a lot of things are changing.
Exploring and changing meaning what?
It could be how we are looking into intimacy. We are no longer going into maybe the temples or the churches or other institutions to look for love. We are on our smartphones, going to dating apps and looking for love. So that's something transformational. The other is we also expect a lot from relationships in today's time. It's a very give and take interpersonal transaction that is happening, very unique to modern times.
So when you say, okay, I have a few questions around this, right? Is it just young adults, or is it also, say, teenagers, older adults, or is it just very specific to young adults?
Mostly very specific to young adults, because something that was very common in the 20s, in traditional times. By 20s, you would have got a job, settled down, got married, have children. But these things are getting delayed in today's time. So as psychologists, demographers, we call it the emerging adulthood time, because that's the period where everything that used to happen in the 20s, it's getting delayed to the 30s. So we are getting married late. We want a lot from our careers. We want a lot from our relationships. And that's why it's mostly young adults. But again, one interesting fact, if you look into the data of the kind of population using dating apps, it's also the 40 to 50 years old. They're using dating apps a lot. So that's a very interesting thing that has started.
So, okay. They say 30s is the new 20s, right? Now, apart from that, the other thing is, say, let's come to dating apps. This is the big thing, right, in modern love. And have dating apps been useful, or are they largely a problem that sort of allow for some level of intimacy? I have had friends who've used the dating apps and have gotten married, are really happy. At the same time, I've had friends who've gone on multiple dates through the dating apps and it has never worked and they really dislike it now. So where is the larger consensus at?
So this brings back, it kind of points to the fact that when television started, a lot of people said like television is a big disadvantage to the population, but we know it did not. And now, same way with technology, when we look into dating apps, There will be people who are against it, who are for it. As psychologist, as maybe somebody who is using dating apps, you have to really know how to use it. You have to know maybe your first initial ideas of what you want from a relationship. And as young adults, we are going through a lot of relationship dilemmas. We want to stay in a relationship. Should I move away from the relationship? What do you want from relationships? Everything is changing. The dilemmas are a lot in today's time. But I think the point is to really understand what you yourself want from a relationship, and that will definitely reflect from the dating apps.
I think that's a very sensible way to go about it. But I don't think most people are using it like this. And that's primarily because I'm not, like we say modern love, but I'm not sure people are really looking for long-term love or relationship. Exactly. Right? That no longer seems to be the, like when we were in college or when our parents, etc., when we were in college probably, people are looking for a long-term intimate partner that they got married to spend their life with, right? Now when I hear in the corridors, I don't think people are really looking for that. I might be biased. So what is the thing there? Are people not looking for love essentially in the early 20s?
There are some dominant trends that are emerging. For example, hookups are very prevalent. Having sex out of your committed relationships. These are very dominant trends.
Or even if you're not committed, just...
Yeah. So you engage in friends with benefits is another big trend that is happening. And when we talk about university, campus, college students, the social norm is that as young adults, you have to explore. So young adults get into that pressure to maybe experiment and explore during this time because they think that's the norm to do it. And somebody who wants a long-term committed, they are outshunned from the... So these are the trends and questions arising.
And then there is also the aspect of the scope or the spread of the sexuality that is there, right? Sexual orientation, which is also now more acceptable. So there are either it's, I don't know if there's evidence that says it was less before and more now, or it has always existed and it's just now coming to the fore because it's acceptable.
Right. So we can say, because as I said, because of technology, young adults are exploring and experimenting. That was something we always used to do in traditional times as well. It's just the mass audience that we are exposed to because of technology, no geographical boundaries. And if somebody comes from a very conservative family and it's very difficult to explore your sexuality, you can go online, find some chat rooms that are only dedicated to your sexual identity and explore. So a lot of alternative ways have emerged because of technology, and in a way it's good for young adults to be exploring and experimenting, because psychologically speaking, this is an age to explore and experiment, to know who you are sexually, gender-wise, and then you can take it forward from there. So it's just new avenues have emerged.
And this change in the dynamic, right, and the new ways in which people are exploring, is this just down to technology and access, or are there other things that are changing the social norms?
There are. So when we talk about love, again, love emerged, romantic love, it emerged in the 19th century. And interestingly, earlier we never used to marry for love. Love was something you did outside of marriage. So it was a love affair that you did with somebody outside your marriage. But then romanticism involved in the 19th century. Our ideals of romance came into being, how we all want a soulmate, we all have a soulmate, and we expect a lot from love. So from there, so romantic love was the first thing that emerged. Then came confluent love. Confluent love is something where all of us, in the moment we are doing it, we want love to be very active and full of efforts. So it's not, we will not leave it to destiny. That you search for it and you make efforts to be in that relationship. And this is something that young adults in today's time, we expect a lot from our loving romantic lives.
This seems like a double-edged sword, where expectations gives you a lot of good feedback when it works, but when it doesn't work, it can get really annoying, right? I also find that older people are baffled by the whole thing of modern love, because they're like, what is going on? They can't really understand what's happening, which actually may be generational, because when they were engaged in it, I'm sure their parents also didn't understand what was happening, right? But just to get into the slightly darker area of this, I think it's all fine and good when we talk about young adults, right? Because young adults, slightly more mature, emerging adults above 20, difficult time but manageable, right? But all of this access and all of this technology is also available to teenagers and children. And there are so many times you hear that, a child was caught doing this,
Right.
and they thought that dating app is okay at this age, and then it led to a whole host of problems. Is that really something that's of concern to psychologists, and how do you sort of deal?
Oh, definitely, because if you look at children and adolescents and their use of smartphones, as young as 6 years old, they have access to smartphones and they're using it, and then they're more advanced in terms of how to use technology. So again, there are a lot of research being done to understand what is happening and what, as parents, as a school community, what can you do. But then again, if you look into the theories of psychology, we need to know how to use technology. Technology is here to stay. We just need to adapt ourselves to use it in a way that is advantageous to us. And as community holders, as stakeholders within the children community, we need to understand how to make them use it. So there is a concern, there always will be. And a lot of research has been done to see what's their screen time use. Does it lead to certain cognitive disadvantages if you give children as young as 5 years old smartphones? But I think as psychologists, we need to know how to help children use it in a way that is advantageous.
I think just to sort of get into a slightly more controversial space, with technology, internet, etc., what has also happened is that there is also a lot of access to adolescents, teenagers, adults, everybody actually, with stuff like pornography.
Right.
And pornography, there is evidence, I think, that shows that once you start watching it, you start to like more extreme content because that's what gives you kicks. And then that might actually be implemented in your real life because you think that's how it should be. And that is of a major concern, right? Because at the end of the day, all the porn site asks, are you 18 above or not? There is no evidence, nothing is required. If you're 14 years old, 12 years old, 10 years old, do you think there is something that we could do in that space to help people navigate it better, understand better, maybe something like sex education, I don't know?
You rightly pointed out, because when we talk about pornography, it changes our ideas of how romance or our relationship should look like, which has nothing to do with our real relationship. It's very fantasy based, very hardcore, and you get into the idea of, oh, it should look like this. And as somebody, a layperson living in a relationship, you start expecting those things in your relationship, and there's a mismatch between the expectations. So I think the first thing that we can do is, again, create awareness of, so that's where my courses, relationships, modern relationships, we can start as young as maybe in the school classrooms, like what is healthy relationships. And when I talk about love and romance, I always talk about love as a skill you need to build. It's not something that we can easily be in loving relationships. You just know. No, it does not happen that way. We all need to know there are certain healthy skills that can be learned as young as a teenage times, and you need to build on those. And you need to keep building also. As anything in life, it has to have a pattern, repeated nature, and then it can become instilled in our behaviors. So love is a skill in my understanding. Yeah.
It's a nice way to put it. I think that it will give a lot of people a lot of heart because they feel like they failed at love, right? Which you can build on it. Yeah. I think a lot of people have resistance to this idea that you can't teach teenagers and school-going kids about sex and sex education, especially in India, right? But what they don't understand is that information is out there anyway. It's coming to them. Exactly. And isn't it better that you control the narrative of what is being explained rather than letting it be a random occasion on Instagram? Suddenly an ad will come, or they'll go on pornography sites, or they'll get together and do all sorts of nonsense and learn that is the norm. Which it surprises me that people, I don't know why no policymaker, no one who's an advocate of this talks about this, that like you said, technology is here to stay. Is there a way we could sort of do this? So
that brings to another interesting point, which I discuss in my classroom, how sex education is delving into the technology spaces. We know we have technology. There are certain influencers without any credible source. They'll start talking about what is relationship, what is sexuality. So that brings back to the point that, yes, absolutely. As somebody who is a psychologist or who teaches certain courses, who researches on these areas, they are the ones who should be going to the classrooms and teaching these things, because we know where it comes from. We know how technology is changing. We know students, teenagers, young adults will definitely go to technology and look for information, because at this point we have access to a lot of information, and As somebody, policymakers, as frame, we need to get into the concept of understanding. Yeah.
Conservatism becomes a hindrance, right? That you have to see reality for what it is. And yes, we have never navigated into this space, although Kama Sutra is our creation. But it's very important that we take care of our young people, and this is actually us taking care and not some perverted sense of, influencing them. I think the last thing I want to discuss is, now technology is one thing you said, right? A lot of people also claim, and there is this narrative that this change in love and modern love is influence of the West on Indian ideology, right? Is that really the case? Is that how it is, or is it a natural progression of humankind?
I would like to put it in a way. So what happened is that now, since we are in the modern times, a lot of social changes have started taking place. The most prominent theme is women going into the workforce, the labor market. So it's not just the men changing their workforce biographies, it's also women changing. And that is what modern sociologists term it as a chaos of love. Since both the partners are working, they have their own career aspirations, they have own needs and desires, it has led to a lot of structural changes in intimacy and love. And as partners, as two partners being in a romantic relationship, you need to understand that dynamics. So it's, yeah.
See, you have access, right? Earlier times, like you were saying, that the male was the breadwinner, female was at home. The only time the male and the female met was either in school, which also women didn't have access for a long time, or that when they became adults, it was like an arranged marriage situation. You meet, or if you're neighbors, if you're lucky and you fall in love, right? But today, there are so many avenues where you can meet the, not just male, female, but whatever your orientation is, at work, at a cafe, at all of these places, at a bar, at a disco, a pub, so many places, right? And that may be what is creating this, right? Right. That's really interesting. Anything else I think you'd want to tell people about?
I think the audience who is listening to us, I just would like to point out, just remember when we talk about healthy relationships, we need to understand from the point of view of what, as an individual, you need to be aware of what you can do to bring in the best in the relationship, not just in yourself, but we have to think of the relationship as a team. So there are certain skills first you need to build within yourselves, and that will definitely reflect in the relationship. So,
like you said, like a transaction, it doesn't really work. It's not a ledger. Yeah.
Which mostly is the case in today's time, because if you think of relationships in today's time, if I'm bored, I'll just move on to the next. This is the notion that's happening. We don't make efforts in relationship. We feel like love is very effortless. The other person needs to read my mind. Telepathy is the worst in relationships. Please talk about your feelings, what you need, and that is definitely going to lead to long-term relationship. Yes.
Thank you. I think that's great. That's a good place to end the podcast, to talk about your feelings and get in touch with your feelings, because that's the most authentic part of you. Thank you, Tanya. I think this was really
so much.
Great.
It was lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot. I hope all of you did too, and please keep listening into the JIBS podcast. Would you mind asking them to like, share, and subscribe?
Oh, please like, subscribe, and share the video. Yes.
What is modern love to you? I think that'll be a very interesting thread of comments to go through. Thank you, and see you again next time.